Well, good morning. I'm Martin Tyner with the Enoch Wildlife Rescue, and right behind me is Helen. You all know Helen. She's our Peregrine Falcon Wildlife Ambassador. And so we thought we'd do a little something different today. And, everyone knows that I have dedicated my life to wildlife rescue, wildlife education. Um, but I actually do a few other things as well. And so we thought we would take a little time and kind of introduce you to some of the other things um, here in southern Utah that are interesting and that I find fascinating that I do get involved with. But DG, why don't we go ahead and bring up the number and see what the question is?
Number time. Okay, number 12. This one is up. Another question, anonymous source. And let's go to here, and here's the question. Does Martin interact differently with Scout the golden eagle to dispatch his captured jackrabbit versus the way he interacts with Belle the Harris hawk after she pins down a jackrabbit? Thank you.
Yes, the interaction with Scout and Bell is different. They're two different birds. They have two different personalities. They have two different abilities. With Belle, um, she is catching rabbits, a jackrabbit that can be twice her size, even as much as three or four times heavier than she is. And so, she handles them well, but I do need to get in very quickly um, to not only assist her in grabbing the rabbit and making sure that if she doesn't have a good grip on it, that the rabbit isn't kicking her. A jackrabbit's back legs are extremely powerful, and it hasn't happened to me, but I have certainly seen um, birds of prey end up with a jackrabbit kicking them hard enough to break a wing. And so it is a little more urgent to get in with Bell to make sure that the rabbit's contained. And also, you know, um, a hawk kills a rabbit like a lion kills a zebra, which basically means they grab it, they get control of it, they hold it, and they start eating till it dies. And that's a very cruel way to die, but this is what Mother Nature does. Um, and so my job is to assist the hawk and making sure that the rabbit is dispatched quickly and humanely so it doesn't suffer. Now with Scout the golden eagle, with his tremendous strength and power, he gets a foot on a jackrabbit, he can easily crush its skull, and so he can grab a rabbit and kill it instantly. And so there's not as much of a need for me to get in there quickly. And so when he catches a rabbit, then I'll get up within range, close enough to him, um, and with his adrenaline going, you want to let him just settle a little bit, um, so that he kind of his hackles come down. He's no longer roused up, and he's just sitting there quietly. The rabbit's already dead, and he starts to feed, and then I walk in quietly, and we make a food exchange. And so the processes are a little bit different because they're very different birds. So anyway, um, you know, when I was a young child, and then this is going to be kind of a little introduce you to some of the other things that make Martin Martin. When I was a young child, my grandmother and I would every week go to the library, and I was allowed to check out any books that I would want to read. And my favorite subjects were dinosaurs, animals, and aviation. And I've always had a passion for those kinds of things. And so, those interests carried me not only through childhood, but through adulthood as well. And so, I get to participate in those kinds of things living here in Utah because Utah is about 80% public lands. And so I'm out with the animals. I'm doing the rescues. I'm monitoring nest sites, and I get out in some beautiful, beautiful, you know, country where very few people have traveled. and I find all sorts of treasures. And so we'll kind of start today with, again, um, I really love um, paleontology and archaeology. I love the native history. I love the ideas that we are surrounded here uh, by remnants and fossils of dinosaurs and all sorts of creatures. And it's hard for people to understand that where I'm sitting right now in my home, this was underwater. This was basically the south end of what they called Lake Bonneville, which was an inland sea. And the Great Salt Lake is a very small portion of what was Lake Bonneville. And it came all the way down into southern Utah, into parts of Nevada as well. It was just this huge inland sea. Um, and so here in Utah, not only do we have Lake Bonneville, but in the past, Utah was at the bottom of the ocean. And so the mountains that we have here, you can go up on the mountains of Utah, especially here in southern Utah, and you can find all sorts of interesting remnants of sea life that that was here 200 million years ago. And so that's where we're going to start a little bit. This is going to be hard for you guys to see, but this is really a wonderful little treasure that I've got. Almost dropped it. Now I don't know if you guys can see this very well, but this is sedimentary rock, um, and it's some of the red Navajo sandstone that we have. Now this I found at about 8,000 feet in elevation, and what you're looking at there, these are the spines from a sea urchin 200 million years ago. And I have picked up wonderful shell fossils from gastropods, clams, whole clam beds. This place is just rich with with all kinds of fossils dating back, like I said, hundreds of thousands of, or actually hundreds of millions of years. And so to be able to hike around and not necessarily be looking for anything particular, I'm more monitoring wildlife, but then you just kind of trip over something that's interesting. And so, that kind of fascinates me about Utah. This is the white in this stone is opal, and I found a place here in southern Utah. They call this button opal. So this is not the fire opal like we're used to seeing that come out of Australia that's so beautiful in all the colors. This is all just pure white opal, and they call it button opal because they used to make buttons for shirts and coats out of this material. But again, a naturally occurring. There's a lot of this in the area, and to be able to, hike out. This one was found right under one of my falcon's nests, and so I thought that was just kind of a beautiful. And I've got lots of pieces of this lying around the house. So we have, like I said, all kinds of interesting things. Uh, Again, this is petrified wood. Nice piece of petrified wood, and we have this all over southern Utah, and we get a chance to go out and again, this is nothing that I actually really went to look for. I'm just out hiking and monitoring nest sites, and then you see an interesting stone, you pick it up, and you're going, wow, that's a really pretty piece of petrified wood. So geology is kind of fun. This is one I picked up this last year. This is the last rock I'll show you. This one I picked up last year. I was up on the mountain and again monitoring falcon nesting sites, and this was actually I was just walking through heavy pine forest where I could get out and see the cliffs. Uh, this is red jasper. This is one big solid piece of red jasper, which is a semi-precious gem. And I just found a whole mountain of this just out here in Utah. So we have a lot of people that come to Utah for the rock hounding, which is fascinating. And people, we have, like I said, lots of fossil beds. We have lots of leaf beds. We have a lot of dinosaur tracks. We have a lot of um, dinosaur areas where paleontologists are finding new species of dinosaurs. Um, I thought it was wonderful. I came across um, a Triceratops footprint um, out here on the desert, and I talked to the state paleontologist about it and told him where it was, and he says that wasn't terribly unusual because here, especially in southern Utah, they have discovered many new species of Triceratops dinosaurs here in southern Utah. In fact, the Escalante Grand Staircase is famous for that. So if you get a chance, you come out to Utah, if you like to do a little rock hounding, this is a really great place to kind of wander and look around. So, it's just my love of nature and getting out allows me to do some kind of fun and interesting things.
So,
Um,
Martin,
go ahead.
you've got some fellow rock fans that are speaking up here. Lori
Oh,
S
wonderful.
says, "Love rocks, beautiful Jasper." Uh, SP says, "Red Jasper," and excitedly. M127, lovely rocks. And then we had a comment about here from TN. Cool, I'm a rockhead.
Well, wonderful. And like I said, I have dedicated my life to the wildlife, but the wildlife has kind of led me into to other interests and opportunities. And Oh, I thought I'd show you this one. When I was out, this was several years ago, and I went up this canyon, and middle of nowhere, and there is the remnants of an old cabin back up in this canyon, and the remnants of what was looked like an old mining operation in the middle, like I said, in the middle of nowhere. This is on public lands, and I just had was kind of looking through, and there's a bunch of old lumber and stuff that's rotted away, and and it's just fascinating to look at this stuff and look at again the history. And this is something I found, and it just fascinates me to no end, that I found this, and it's in very, very good shape. A ladle. And so here's an old wooden ladle, that certainly would have to date back um, to the 1850s when the pioneers started coming out here. And like you said, it's just a little bit of odds and ends and bits and pieces of Utah history. Um, I there's no records that I could find that would indicate um, a claim on the property and who had built that little homestead. And like I said, it was all completely ground level. It was completely dilapidated and had fallen down. But I saw that little in the dirt, kind of under a bunch of logs. I see this little piece of wood sticking out, just about that much sticking out of the. And so I started taking my fingers and digging down just a little bit, and I found this little ladle. And I have found, um, I have found old cowbells. I have found all sorts of interesting little artifacts that date back to our pioneer heritage here in Utah. Um, and so that's again one of the things that just fascinates me about the area is you just never know as you're walking along what you're gonna pick up in the area. Um, Another thing that I have a tremendous love for, and that's always been aviation. Um, and as a child, like I said, I read a lot of books on every kind of aircraft you could imagine. And um, when I was 15, going on 16, and I met a man in my hometown, and he had just moved to the area. He was going to my church. Seemed like a nice fellow, and he was offering flying lessons. He had a little Cessna 170, which is, most people are familiar with the 172. The 170 basically is what we call a tail dragger, where it has a tail wheel instead of a nose wheel. And he had this 170 that he would give flying lessons in. And the flying lessons way back, now we're talking the late 60s now. It was $500, and that he would take you through uh, to the point you could take your check ride. Now, as far as the schooling goes, that was up to you, but he would give you the flying lessons. And so I thought that was a really good idea and a great deal. And I've wanted to fly so badly. I I never told my parents because I knew that they would forbid me from actually following that dream to becoming a pilot. And so, without my parents' knowledge and without their permission, I went to the bank and I withdrew um, all but a dollar or two of money from my bank account, um, my savings account, and the money was raised from my paper route and mowing lawns and pulling weeds and just doing, chores that most, teenagers and children can do to raise a little bit of money. And I had $400 in the bank, and I needed five, but I felt that if I could, by the time I would get through all the flying lessons, I would have been able to raise $100 more to have the full $500, and I would get my pilot's license. And so, like I said, without and to this day, my parents never knew that I withdrew the money from my bank account. And so I gave this guy $400 and to start taking flying lessons from him. And unfortunately, um, I got two flying lessons, and he flew away. So I never got my pilot's license when I was a teenager. I was hoping to be able, at 16 you can get your pilot's license, and I was hoping to have my pilot's license by the time I turned 16. And so, was really a sad situation that he just left with my money. And I don't know how many other people he scammed, but he just flew away. And but I did get to fly with him twice, and I knew before that, but I knew even more that that someday I would get my pilot's license and that I would be a pilot. And it was something that just was deep inside of me that I had to do this. And so for um, many years, anytime I could find anything to have to do with flying, I find that fascinating. And my friend and we found, um, and I believe it was Popular Mechanics, an article on how to build a hang glider. And this hang glider, it was made out of bamboo poles and black visqueen plastic and duct tape. I mean, just the rickety worst thing you could possibly imagine. And so, we had access to getting some bamboo poles, and of course, heavy duty black visqueen plastic. You could pick it up at any hardware store, and duct tape. And so we followed the basic concept. It didn't really have a set of plans, just kind of a basic. It's this big and this wide and so on and so forth. We just kind of followed the basic understanding from the article. And my best friend and I at the time, we made a hang glider. and we would take the bamboo poles and visqueen, and we would go about 45 miles to the California coast, to where there were some sand dunes that went into the ocean, went down to the ocean. And we'd strap all the bamboo poles on my Volkswagen Bug. I had a 1956 Volkswagen Bug, which, most of the time it would break down, but it would get us places. And so we went and we took this visqueen and plastic and we taped it all together on site, and we would then hang on to the poles, on the bamboo poles, and we would run off the hill. Now, the highest we ever got was probably about 3 or 4 feet in the air. And we would glide down the slope, hanging onto the bamboo poles, and it was a great thrill for some 16, 17-year-old kids to be able to do that. Unfortunately, we were only able to get about 3 runs down the hill, and the visqueen plastic would stretch so badly, and the black tape wouldn't hold. And on usually about the 3rd time, everything would fall apart. And so then we'd bring it back up to the parking area and put more visqueen on and more duct tape and more and so that was my first actual physical flight that I did as a teenager. I did as a teenager take a sheet and jump off a roof. But like I said, I was one of those kids that just wanted to get his feet off the ground, and I just love aviation. Well, many years later, I'm married to my sweet wife Susan. We're living in Utah here, and I run into some guys with these long bags on the top of their car, and inside those transport bags were hang gliders. And they were flying their hang gliders right here off the mountains here around the Cedar City, Utah area. And so I got fascinated to go see what these guys were doing and watch them fly off the mountains. And I just loved that. And so one entire summer, every time these guys would come up and fly their hang gliders, I would make arrangements at my business so I could have a little time off. My pet store became the contact point, because these guys would fly off the mountains and they would go cross country heading north, and then wherever they would land, they would try to find a telephone, call back to my pet store, and the ground crew would come to the pet store and get the message, and they'd go pick up the pilot that flew the hang glider. This is before we had cell phones. So anyway, I was offered a hang glider, and I, talked to my wife about that, and she knew that my passion for flight, and she gave me permission to purchase a hang glider. Now, it was a really old primitive hang glider. It was called a Phoenix 6B. We didn't have parachutes, emergency parachutes back then. That particular hang glider, you sat on a wooden swing underneath the hang glider, and we didn't have fancy harnesses or anything like that. And so you'd basically assemble the hang glider on top of the mountain, run off the mountain. You'd sit in the seat and you would glide, and mostly you would just glide down, and the higher the mountain, the further you could fly. And so, it became pretty obvious how dangerous this was. There was no dive recovery in these old hang gliders. If you hit any turbulence, you would easily die. Like I said, no emergency parachutes. This was the early days of hang gliding, when the vast majority of the pioneers in hang gliding died from their love of aviation, and this was one of those death traps. So I flew hang gliders for about 3 years, and it got to the point where I didn't have a ground crew. Nobody wanted to drive to the top of the mountain and sit there as we wait for the weather conditions to be perfect. I fly off the mountain, and then they have to drive and chase me with a chase vehicle to wherever I landed. And so I would be the only one having the fun of flying, and the ground crew would be bored to death. And it got to the point after a couple 3 years, people didn't want to do that anymore. And so hang gliding became something that just wasn't feasible here for me. So I sold the hang glider. Um, so never got hurt. That was wonderful. But as I look back now and understand what I was doing, my goodness sakes, I'm lucky I'm still alive with the stupid things I did. A few years later, things had progressed greatly. Hang gliders became much, much better, but there was a new thing coming out called paraglider. In paragliders, you had a parachute that you would basically um, inflate into the wind up on the hill, and then you would run off the cliff with an inflated parachute, and you would fly using these parachute wings. And that's the easiest way to describe it. They're far more complex than that. But and then we had uh, basically recovery parachutes in case something went wrong. We had harnesses. Things were much, much safer, much better. And so I did that for a while. And again, we ended up with the same issues that I didn't have a ground crew that would chase me, and so I ended up selling the paraglider and got out of that. And so I decided the next thing I really wanted to be able to fly, and an ultralight. Ultralights were becoming a big thing now. There were a lot of ultralights that you could build at home. And so talking it over with Susan, Susan is so patient. She let me start ordering parts so that I could build an ultralight. And the ultralight had a big hang glider wing and three wheels and a motor, and you could take off from the ground. You didn't need a chase vehicle. You didn't need a ground crew. I could take off from the dry lake bed north of town and go fly around, and I could land, and it would cure all of my issues with wanting to be able to fly, but not having the resources available to me. And so I started collecting the parts and building an ultralight. And again, all of this, the money couldn't come from the family budget. It had to come from raising money in other ways. Doing extra jobs and things that I could do to raise extra funds, so I didn't take the money out of the family budget. Well, after a few years of working on this ultralight that I was trying to build, I told my wife Susan that I needed to purchase some more parts, and that I had saved up about $4,000 to purchase, and this would be the rest of the parts that I would need to complete the ultralight. And my wife says, "Well, how much would it cost to get your pilot's license?" And I told my wife Susan that it would cost about $4,000 at the time. And she says, "Then why don't you stop messing around with these stupid ultralights and get your pilot's license, because that's what you really want." I have such a smart wife, and she's correct. That's my dream, to have a pilot's license. And so I stopped building the ultralight. I found a flight instructor the next town over in Parowan, about 25 miles from here. He was retired, and he wasn't teaching any longer, but I sat down and visited with him, and because of my passion and my knowledge, he agreed to teach me. And so his name was Gene Graham, and so we started flying lessons, and we used an airplane that was for rent at the Parowan Airport, and started to actually follow my dream of becoming a pilot. And as we're kind of going through the process, and the flight instructor was wonderful, and this really meant the world to me, that here I am. I've now soloed. I'm now flying by myself in a real live airplane, and I have to get my 40 hours in before I can take my check ride. And doing all of the study myself. I'm doing all the ground school myself. I ordered all the books and information, things that I need to study, and was ready to take the written test for my pilot's license. And I sat down, was talking to Susan, and says, once I get my pilot's license, that's probably going to be it. And the reason that it's going to be it is because it's so expensive to rent an airplane. I says, we just can't really afford it, but at least I will have achieved my dream. And so my wife says, well, how much would it cost to buy an airplane? And I said, oh, we can't afford one. And she says, well, we were talking about refinancing our home because interest rates were way down. I mean, my home right here, when we bought this home, we were paying, I think, 12.5% interest on the house. And now interest rates are down at like 3%. And we talked to a financial advisor, and we could refinance the home, lower our house payments, and still have $20,000 left over to buy an airplane. Now that's a really cheap airplane, but it was enough. And so I went out and I found my little Cessna 150, and it was mechanically sound, and it was a wonderful little airplane. And so I was able to finish my pilot training in my own aircraft. And since we had paid for it, I didn't have to pay rental fees, and rental fees was like $150 an hour. My little Cessna burns 5 gallons of gas an hour, and at the time, gas was less than $3 a gallon for car gas, which my airplane would fly on car gas. And so it would cost me 15-20 bucks an hour to fly my airplane. And so that was a great investment. And so I spent several years with my own little airplane and flying around Utah to pick up sick, injured, and orphaned wildlife. It saved me a great deal of time to be able to use my little airplane for my wildlife rescue as well. Now, here's kind of the cool thing with this whole story is that as I was working through to get my pilot's license, and I was in no real rush because I was soloed, I was flying my own plane, and I could fly anywhere that I wanted to fly. I just have to tell my flight instructor where I was going, and so there wasn't, all the pressure was off to hurry up and get my license because it really wasn't costing me a lot of money. And so, I flew the plane for about a year with my student license. Couldn't take anybody flying, just me. And then it kind of dawned on me. This was 2003, and this was in the early fall of 2003, and on December 17th, I believe it's 1903, was the Wright brothers 100 was the Wright brothers' first flight. And so with 2003, December 17th was going to be the 100th year anniversary of the Wright brothers' first flight. And so I buckled down and started getting serious and says, boy, that would be wonderful. I could take my check ride. I passed the written tests, and now I have to do my oral exam and my check ride. And so a little more studying and a little more practice. By December 17th, I could be a pilot. I could be a certified pilot on the day of the Wright brothers' first flight. So that was the goal, and I achieved that goal. So the weather conditions, I was worried about the weather because it was December, but the weather conditions were perfect. The inspector, we sat down for my oral test. Um, and much to my surprise, because I had got a 100% on the original written test, that there was no oral test, because the purpose for the oral test is to make sure that anything that you got wrong on the written test, that you would review and make sure that you understood what it was. And so there was virtually no oral test. Just I was just to lay out a plan to fly cross country, and for which I did, and then it was time to go fly, to get in my little airplane with the inspector, and fly. Now the inspector was really good friends with my flight instructor, and my flight instructor encouraged him um, to make the test as tough as he could, because my flight instructor thought I was up for any challenge. And I didn't know that at the time. So here we are, we're getting ready to fly. And we're out to the airplane. I'm walking through my pre-flight checklist to inspect the airplane thoroughly. And the inspector basically gets in the plane, and he basically sits down, and in my airplane I have seat belts and shoulder harnesses, and not all of them have the shoulder harness, but mine did. And so the inspector gets in the plane, he clips on his seatbelt, and he says, "We're ready to go." And I says, well, would you please lock the door? And he says, "Lock the door?" And I says, "Yeah." He says, "In the checklist, it is required that the door be locked before takeoff, so the door doesn't accidentally fly open in flight." And I says, "And I want you to put on your shoulder harnesses." And he says, "Oh, we're just going to go fly the pattern and a little practice area out west." He says, "I don't need the shoulder harnesses." He says, "No, you put on your shoulder harnesses. Um, I am pilot in command. I am flying this aircraft, and we're going to do this the right way." And he got a big grin on his face, and he says, "Right answer." And he says, "If you wouldn't have required that I lock the door, and if you would not have required me to put on the shoulder harnesses because you have them in your airplane, I would have failed you. And you would have had to come back a week or so later, make a new appointment, and take the test again. So I would have failed my goal of being licensing on the Wright brothers first day. So I did it, and we taxied out. Everything was fine. As soon as we get off the ground and we're flying, everything's perfect.
Well, everything not so perfect. I think Martin's phone has just rung and he has disappeared again. So I'm going to disconnect him and then he's going to call back and then we will wrap up. Sorry for the interruption yet again. Here he comes. Okay, Martin is back. Okay, Martin, we got you
I'm
back.
back.
All right. We figured you got a phone call, which
Yeah,
is
and
weird because like we were a minute late because we were trying to get your phone off of Alpha that or whatever.
yeah, it just the button. I pushed the button, and I thought it went to do not disturb, but
Oops.
I I guess it didn't. But anyway, so
Okay.
we're good now.
Well, since we're got a little interruption, we kind of had a cool comment back I wanted to share with you.
Yes.
Chad Weaver says Martin's stories are always interesting, but Helen has been hamming it up and stealing his thunder.
Well, they always say, when I was working in the movie and television industry training animals, the old saying is that that an actor should never work with animals or children, and that's very, very true. Anyway, I'll end that story. But the point is, I was able to succeed in my dream to become a licensed pilot on the day of the Wright brothers 100th anniversary. I can't fly anymore because of my medical issues with my heart problems and those kinds of things, I will no longer pass a flight physical. So my aviation days are over, which is sad. But you know, I I have done something that was a dream of mine ever since I was a little kid. I have gotten to my airplane, and I've flown up to the right up into the base of clouds, and have been able to open the window and put my hand out the window and touch a cloud. And that experience meant the world to me. Um, a cloud is nothing but fog that's above the ground, and so it really shouldn't mean anything to anybody but me personally. But to be at 12,000 feet, um, and to be able to reach my hand out the window and touch a cloud, kind of drove home that I succeeded. So that was wonderful.
You
Any
know,
other questions?
yeah, I was just thinking of one. We're so often getting questions about when are you going to be writing the next Healer of Angels, and I was just thinking that maybe you shouldn't write it at all, but you should just talk about it because everything is so like on the web and video cast, podcast, and everything. Maybe we just have you talk your next book rather than write it.
Well, and actually, that's kind of true. I've been asked many times to, when's the next book's coming out, and the problem is writing a. When I wrote Healer of Angels, um, it was an amazing experience for me. Um, I tell all, I do all these wildlife shows, and I tell all these wildlife stories when I'm doing these programs, and my sweet wife Susan, told me one day. She says, we really need to write these stories down, because this is your life history. This is who you are, and we really need to have these preserved for our grandchildren and great grandchildren. And so my wife and I decided that we would go ahead and start writing down all of my stories. And as we were writing them down, it was one of the best experiences of my life, because we sat right here on this couch, and my wife and I are we've got pencil and paper, and we've got a computer, and we're snuggled up together on the couch, and we're working together to write these stories. And so the ones that my wife wrote, I would edit and critique. The ones that I wrote, my wife Susan would edit and critique. Yes, I know you haven't got your breakfast yet, sweetie. We'll go in a little bit. She wants to go back outside and have her breakfast. And it was an opportunity that brought Susan and I so close to sharing these stories and putting them together. And then after a pretty big stack of stories, my wife and I kind of said, you know what? I think we have a book. And so we sent the manuscript of the book out to different people, friends of ours, and they read the original manuscript, and they says, yeah, you got a book. This book is fun, and it's interesting, and it's wonderful. And so we started to get the book published. So we have to get to that point again, where Susan and I can cuddle up on the couch together and have the time to write more stories. But I'm happy to share these stories, on these video podcasts with you guys. So like I said, I've had an amazing life, and I'm so thrilled that I've had my sweet wife Susan to share them with. So anyway, I don't know how much longer you want to go. We certainly can go longer. I have kind of one other thing I wanted to show you guys. Do we have time for one more story, DG?
If you want, I guess we can.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just watching Helen, so whatever you want to
Yeah,
do.
everybody watches Helen. She's far better looking than I am. This is my guitar. Now, the thing that you have to understand is I love music. I just have a passion for music. And I've always wanted to play the guitar ever since I was a young child. In fact, I still have my first guitar that I got when I was about 12, 13 years old. I still have it. And the guitar, unfortunately, I I am one of those people that will never be able to play a musical instrument well, ever. I just can't. I don't have the skills. I have taken music lessons many times. Um, I I am we've all been to family gatherings when they bring out the grandkid with a violin and says, "Oh, he's going to play Jingle Bells for you," and you're going, "Oh my God, do I have to listen to this?" Um, you know, I am that kid. I'm that kid that wasn't brought out to play, but I'm the kid that was that bad. And I'm really good at other things, but music is just not one of them. Though I do love the guitar and I do play the guitar for my own personal enjoyment, but I would never subject you folks to that kind of torture. Um, so anyway, uh, like I said, I've had a guitar since I was 12, and my when we had COVID, and I was not able to travel and do the educational programs that I do, I was looking for a project, something that I could do um, to kind of take up some time, and it kind of dawned on me. Uh, I had researched how to build a guitar 30 years ago, and I had two or three books on it, and all of the techniques and everything on how to build a guitar, and it was and just the whole mechanism of a guitar was fascinating to me. But I never had the time, never got around to it. But now that COVID was hit and I had some extra time, I decided that I was going to build a guitar, and so I built this one. And so this guitar is a representation of me. This guitar is very traditional. This guitar is from a set of plans um, from a 1920s Martin triple aught guitar. Is the set of plans I built this from. It is traditional Indian rosewood sides and back, mahogany neck, 25-year-old Sitka spruce, and a really traditional slot head on the guitar. And in the process of building this thing, um, it was great fun. I'm a relatively good craftsman. I'm a terrible musician, but I'm a good craftsman. And so this was a wonderful project for me to do. And I added some very special touches to this guitar. The uh, the nut right here, this nut, as you see, it's kind of an odd color because that is deer antler from the first deer I harvested as a teenager, and I did deer antler on the uh, on the bridge as well. And so this guitar was all handcrafted by me, and I wrote on the inside of the soundboard. This is the soundboard, but on the inside underneath, I wrote a note to my great grandchildren because I'm hoping that at some point in time, uh, one of my grandchildren, great grandchildren, great grandchildren, whatever, uh, will be musically inclined and will be able to play this guitar um, like it should be played. And so the note that I left in my guitar for them, and again, I wrote it inside. So in order to see it, you have to put a mirror in there, and all the letters are backwards, so you have to decipher it. But the note that I wrote in the guitar for my grandkids was that um, who will probably never hear my voice. This is my voice, the music from this guitar. This is my voice. Susan is my love. Family is my life. do good today, do good, which is the advice I got from my grandfather. So that is the story of my guitar. And like I said, I won't torture you by playing it for you, but it is been a wonderful project to have the opportunity to again complete another passion that I have. So we've taken way too much time, I think, today.
Okay.
Uh, DG, you had something a poem that DG wants to read, and this is really good. Where it's basically recognizing all of the amazing sponsors that have helped us. You want to do that for us, DG?
Okay. This is DG, the volunteer critter web geek, with further info on sponsors you seek. Throughout my geek life, I've met many resources fair, none so divine as the web host called Pear. Over 20 years they have been great to me, and long hosted our wildlife website for free. Next in line was an amazing bigwig Canadian man, Kevin of Official Community, of whom forever I am a fan. My very first professional web job he gave to me, and still his learned guidance he has offered us free. It was through Kevin my next gig did arrive. It is a position in which I continue to thrive. For over 20 years, for one family I serve, they have been the best client beyond deserve. For the Marley family, I do everything I can. Of their One Love banner, forever am I a fan. It was in this role I found a huge treasure, one whose music to all has been such pleasure. Our channel musician Casey did a Marley tune, so the rest of his music loved did I soon. Because of so much client and friend support, much time and resources to the critters I can report. Okay, so we ready to sign off?
We are. I know just one little last point. I know we had listed that we were going to do the personal tour that I'm taking all of you guys on uh, of the Enoch Wildlife Rescue Facility. We're going to do that. We were going to do that today, but I did get a confirmation back from the mayor of Enoch, Utah, and he would like to be part of that. And but he could not meet us until tomorrow. So tomorrow at 9 o'clock, please join us. We will be at the Enoch Wildlife Rescue, where you're going to do a live podcast, and we will have the mayor of Enoch. And this is be the very first time that he has seen the new facility, and so we're excited. So please join us tomorrow. Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you soon.